Princess Diana was having the worst day of her life: divorce papers, media attacks, and a family crisis. Then her car ran out of petrol in a rough neighborhood. The unlikely hero who helped her wasn't who anyone would expect. October 14th, 1996 started like any other Monday morning at Kensington Palace, but by noon it had become the day that would test Princess Diana's resilience in ways she never imagined. The morning's first blow came with her breakfast: divorce papers from Charles's solicitors, more hostile and punitive than anything she had expected. Sarah Whitfield, Diana's private secretary, watched with concern as Diana read through the documents. "They're demanding complete custody restrictions," Diana said, her voice barely steady. "They want to limit when I can see William and Harry, where I can take them, even what activities I can share with my own children." The second devastating blow came just an hour later. James Mitchell, her security chief, entered with a grim expression and a stack of morning newspapers. The headlines were brutal: "Diana's mental breakdown, palace sources reveal truth," "Unstable mother, should Diana keep her children?" and "Royal insider, she's lost control." Diana stared at the papers in disbelief. Someone from within her own circle had been feeding the press devastating personal information. Stories about her therapy sessions, her emotional struggles, even private conversations she had thought were confidential, all laid bare for public consumption. The third catastrophic blow came at 2 p.m. when 15-year-old Prince William called from school, his voice cold and distant. "Mummy, I can't talk to you right now. The boys at school are saying horrible things about you. The headmaster wants to see me because of all the newspapers. I just..." Diana stared at the receiver, feeling like her heart had been torn from her chest. William had never spoken to her like that before. Her relationship with her sons was the one pure thing in her complicated life, and now even that seemed to be slipping away. By 4 p.m., Diana couldn't stay in the palace a moment longer. Against James Mitchell's advice, she decided to drive herself to a private appointment with her therapist in South London. She needed to talk to someone, anyone, who might help her make sense of the chaos her life had become. Diana got into her dark blue Ford Escort, one of the anonymous cars she used when she wanted to move around London without being recognized. The drive through London's busy streets should have been calming, but Diana found herself fighting back tears at every red light. As she drove through increasingly unfamiliar neighborhoods, Diana realized she had taken a wrong turn somewhere. The elegant streets of central London had given way to rows of council flats, boarded-up shops, and graffiti-covered walls. This was Brixton, an area she had only seen from the safety of official royal visits with full security details. Then disaster struck. The car began to sputter, cough, and finally rolled to a complete stop. Diana turned the key frantically, but nothing happened. The fuel gauge showed completely empty. In her emotional state, she hadn't noticed she was running on fumes. Diana sat in the silent car, looking around at the unfamiliar and somewhat intimidating neighborhood. For the first time in years, Princess Diana felt completely powerless and alone. Her mobile phone had no signal, her security detail was nowhere to be seen, and she was stranded in one of London's most challenging areas, with no way to contact help. As evening began to fall, Diana saw a small shop with bright lights still on, Al-Rashid Corner Store. The sign read in English and Arabic. Through the window she could see shelves of food, newspapers, and basic necessities. Taking a deep breath, she locked her car and walked toward what she hoped would be sanctuary. Fatima Al-Rashid was closing her shop when she saw the well-dressed woman approach hesitantly. Fatima had run this corner store for 12 years, serving the local community through good times and bad. She had seen her share of people in distress, and her instincts immediately told her this woman needed help. "Please," Diana said as she entered the shop, "my car has broken down and I can't get through to anyone on my phone. Could I possibly use your telephone?" Fatima studied the woman's face, noting the expensive clothes but also the obvious distress. "Of course, dear, phone's right here. Are you all right? You look upset." Diana tried calling James Mitchell's direct line but got only voicemail. She tried the palace but was put on hold indefinitely. As she stood there holding the phone, the stress and emotional exhaustion of the day finally overwhelmed her. She began to cry. Not the careful, controlled tears she had learned to manage in public, but deep, painful sobs that came from somewhere she had kept locked away for years. Fatima immediately came around the counter and put a gentle arm around Diana's shoulders. "There now, whatever it is, it's not the end of the world. Come, sit down, let me make you some tea." Diana allowed herself to be led to a small chair behind the counter. Fatima bustled around, making tea with practiced efficiency. The shop smelled of spices, fresh bread, and the comforting sense of a place where families shopped for their daily needs. "I'm Fatima," the shopkeeper said, handing Diana a steaming cup. "I've been running this shop since 1984. Seen a lot of people having bad days. Usually helps to talk about it." Diana accepted the tea gratefully, warming her hands on the cup. For the first time all day, she felt safe. I'm having the worst day of my life. Everything is falling apart, and I don't know how to fix any of it." Fatima nodded knowingly. "Some days are like that. Had plenty myself. Lost my husband 5 years ago, nearly lost the shop to developers last year, and my son's been struggling with finding work. But you know what I learned? Bad days pass, but how we handle them shows us who we really are." "Tell me about your husband," Diana said softly, recognizing a fellow widow's pain. Fatima's eyes softened. "Ahmed was a good man. Worked 2 jobs to help us build this shop. Always put family first. Heart attack at 52. Too much stress. Too much worry about making ends meet. For months after he died, I didn't know how to carry on." She gestured toward a framed photograph behind the counter, showing a smiling man with kind eyes. "The community kept me going. Mrs. Morrison brought me meals for weeks. Danny fixed things around the shop without being asked. Young Marcus here started helping with deliveries just because he saw I was struggling." Diana felt tears welling up again, but this time they were tears of recognition rather than despair. "How do you keep going when everything feels impossible?" "One day at a time," Fatima replied simply, "and by remembering that we're not meant to carry our burdens alone." Ahmed used to say that pride is expensive. Sometimes we can't afford it. Just then the shop door chimed, and a teenage boy entered. Marcus Johnson was 16, tall and lanky, with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing despite his worn clothing. He nodded respectfully to Fatima and glanced curiously at Diana. "Evening, Mrs. Veff," Marcus said. "Mum sent me for milk and bread. How are you doing tonight?" "I'm fine, love. This lady here is having some car trouble. Marcus, you know about engines, don't you?" Marcus looked more closely at Diana, and his eyes widened slightly in recognition. Wait! Are you Princess Diana?" Diana tensed, expecting the usual reaction: excitement, request for photographs, or worse, someone calling the newspapers. Instead, Marcus simply nodded as if meeting royalty in his local shop was perfectly normal. "I think I ran out of petrol." Marcus grinned. "That's the good kind of car trouble. Easy to fix. Danny Cooper's garage is just down the street. He'll sort you out. But the petrol stations around here are all closed this time of evening." As Marcus left to find the mechanic, Diana turned back to Fatima. "Aren't you curious about who I am? Most people would be taking photographs or calling someone by now." Fatima smiled gently. "I recognized you the moment you walked in, dear. But famous or not, you're a woman having a terrible day who needed help. That's what matters to me." Diana felt a wave of gratitude unlike anything she had experienced in years. "You're extraordinary, do you know that?" "No more extraordinary than anyone else trying to do right by their neighbors," Fatima replied. "You want to know something? I've seen you on the television visiting hospitals and such. You always look so composed, so sure of yourself. But tonight you look like any mother who's worried about her children and doesn't know which way to turn." Diana felt her carefully constructed public image crumbling, but instead of fear, she felt relief. "I don't know which way to turn. My marriage is ending badly. The newspapers are printing lies about me, and today my son couldn't even bear to talk to me because of all the horrible things being said." "Children forgive," Fatima said with certainty. "My own son went through a phase where he was ashamed of our shop, ashamed that we weren't wealthy like some of his schoolmates' families. He said cruel things stayed away from home, but love wins in the end if you're patient." The shop door chimed again, and an elderly woman entered with a walking stick and a warm smile. Mrs. Ethel Morrison had been a nurse for 40 years before retiring to the area. She moved slowly but with purpose, clearly a regular customer. "Good evening, Fatima dear. The usual prescriptions, please, and could I have a word about my grandson?" Diana watched as Fatima efficiently gathered several packages from behind the counter. Clearly medications that Mrs. Morrison needed but couldn't easily collect from distant pharmacies. The two women spoke quietly about the grandmother's concerns for her teenage grandson. "Mrs. Morrison," Fatima said gently, "why don't you send him to me after school tomorrow? I could use help with inventory, and it might give him something constructive to do." Mrs. Morrison's face lit up. "Would you really? He's a good boy, just needs direction. His parents work such long hours, and I can't keep up with a 14-year-old's energy." Diana marveled at this simple act of community care. No bureaucracy, no formal programs, no publicity, just one person helping another because it was the right thing to do. As Mrs. Morrison was leaving, she noticed Diana sitting quietly in the corner. "Are you all right, dear? You look like you've had a difficult day." Before Diana could respond, Mrs. Morrison continued, "I was a nurse for 4 decades. I can spot someone who's carrying too much weight on their shoulders. Whatever it is, it will pass. Bad times always do if you let good people help you through them." "Mrs. Morrison," Diana said impulsively, "may I ask you something? How do you keep helping people when your own life has been difficult?" The elderly woman settled into a chair, clearly happy to share her wisdom. "Well, dear, I nursed through the Blitz, through decades of NHS cutbacks, through my husband's long illness before he passed. I learned that helping others isn't about having your own life sorted out first. It's about recognizing that we're all struggling with something." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "The secret is that helping others actually helps you more than it helps them. When my husband was dying, I volunteered at the children's ward. Those sick little ones gave me more strength than any medicine could have." Marcus returned with Danny Cooper, a friendly man in his 30s, whose hands were stained with engine oil, but whose smile was genuine. Danny carried a petrol can and some basic tools. "Right then," Danny said cheerfully, "let's get you sorted. Marcus says you're having a rough day. We've all been there." As the three of them walked to Diana's car, she found herself in the middle of an easy, comfortable conversation about neighborhood happenings, local politics, and shared concerns about young people having enough opportunities. No one treated her differently because of who she was. They simply included her as another person who needed help. "See, the thing about this area," Danny explained as he worked on her car, "is that we look after each other because we have to. The council's forgotten we exist. The police are spread too thin, and most of us don't have much money. But we've got something more important. We've got community." Marcus nodded in agreement. "My mom always says that poor people are actually richer in some ways because we understand that we need each other. Rich people can buy their way out of problems, so they never learn how to really connect." Diana was struck by the profound truth in this observation. "I think I'm beginning to understand what you mean." Danny quickly diagnosed the problem, filled the car with petrol, and checked the engine to make sure everything else was working properly. "Should be fine now," he said. "But next time you're driving around here, stop in at the garage. I'll make sure you've got my number in case of emergencies." Diana tried to pay Danny for the petrol in his time, but he waved her money away. "Fatima's been good to my family for years. When my wife was in hospital having our daughter, Fatima made sure our boy had proper meals every day. Anyone she vouches for is good with me. Just pass it along when you see someone else who needs help." Back at the shop, Diana found Fatima packaging up some homemade samosas. "For your journey home," she explained. "And here's my number. If you ever find yourself in this area again, or if you just need someone to talk to, don't hesitate to call." Diana accepted the food and the phone number, realizing she had learned more about genuine community service in 3 hours than in years of official charity visits. These people didn't help others because it was their job or because cameras were watching. They did it because that's who they were. As she prepared to leave, Marcus approached her quietly. "Can I ask you something? Why do you look so sad? I mean, you're Princess Diana. Don't you have everything?" Diana considered the question seriously. "I thought I knew what I had and what I'd lost. Today I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what really matters." Marcus nodded as if this made perfect sense to him. "My mom always says that real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about who helps you get back up and whether you remember to help others when they fall." "Your mother sounds very wise," Diana said. "She is. She cleans offices at night and works in a care home during the day. Never complains, even though her back hurts and she's always tired. She says work is a blessing because it means we can help ourselves and others." Diana thought about her own privileged position and how she had sometimes taken for granted the ability to help others. What does she think about me? About the royal family? Marcus considered this carefully. "She thinks you're different from the others. She says you look at people like they matter, not like they're just part of your job. But she also thinks you carry too much weight on your own shoulders." "What do you mean?" "She says you try to fix everything for everyone, but you can't fix the whole world by yourself. Sometimes the best help is just showing people they're not alone." Diana felt a profound shift in her understanding. She had been so focused on grand gestures and visible impact that she had sometimes missed the simple power of just being present with people in their struggles. Mrs. Morrison, who had been listening quietly, added her own perspective. "Dear, in my 40 years as a nurse, I learned that sometimes the most healing thing you can do for someone is just sit with them in their pain. You don't have to fix it or solve it. Just acknowledge it and stay present." Diana looked around at these three people who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed them most. They had asked for nothing, expected nothing, but had given her exactly what she needed: practical help. genuine kindness, and profound wisdom about what it means to truly serve others. You've taught me more tonight than I learned in years of royal training, Diana said honestly. About what it really means to help people, about what community looks like, about how to be strong when everything is falling apart. Danny, who had been quietly checking her car one more time, looked up. Can I say something? My wife and I, we watch you on the telly sometimes. She always says you look lonely, even when you're surrounded by people. Tonight you look different, less lonely, if that makes sense. Diana realized he was absolutely right. For the first time in months, she didn't feel isolated and alone. She felt connected to something real and meaningful. It makes perfect sense, she replied. I've been so focused on my royal duties that I forgot what it felt like to just be a human being among other human beings. As they stood together outside the little shop, Diana looked around at the neighborhood with new eyes. What she had initially seen as challenging and intimidating now looked like a community. People who knew each other, cared for each other, and supported each other through difficult times. Thank you, she said simply. All of you. You have no idea how much this has meant to me. Fatima smiled warmly. We all need help sometimes. The trick is being humble enough to accept it when it comes, and wise enough to recognize that the people offering help often need it just as much as you do. During the drive back to Kensington Palace, Diana reflected deeply on the day's experiences. The morning's disasters, the divorce papers, the media attacks, even William's distressing phone call seemed less overwhelming now. She had been reminded that real strength didn't come from position or wealth, but from the connections people made with each other. More importantly, she had learned that accepting help gracefully was just as important as giving it, and that sometimes being vulnerable and admitting you need support was actually a form of leadership. It gave others permission to be human too. The next morning, Diana woke up with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She called her solicitor with new instructions for handling the divorce proceedings. She would fight for her children, but she would do it with the dignity and quiet determination she had seen modeled in Fatima's shop. She also called her press secretary with a new strategy for dealing with media attacks. Instead of defensive responses that only escalated conflicts, she would focus on positive actions that demonstrated her values. The same way Fatima, Marcus, Danny, and Mrs. Morrison lived their values every day without fanfare. Most importantly, she called William back. Darling, I'm sorry yesterday was so difficult for you. I want you to know that no matter what anyone says or writes about our family, nothing will ever change how much I love you and Harry. We'll get through this together and we'll be stronger for it. William's voice was much warmer than it had been the day before. I'm sorry I was short with you, Mummy. I was just angry about all the newspaper stories. I know they're not true. I love you too. Over the following weeks, Diana found herself returning to Fatima's shop regularly, not because she needed help, but because she had found something there she had been searching for without knowing it, a model of authentic community care that transcended social boundaries. She began incorporating the lessons she learned that night into all her charitable work. Instead of just making grand gestures and photo opportunities, she focused on building sustainable relationships and practical support systems that could continue growing without her constant presence. Fatima, Marcus, Danny, and Mrs. Morrison never spoke to the press about their encounter with Princess Diana. They understood instinctively that some moments are too important and too sacred to be reduced to newspaper headlines. Years later, when Diana reflected on the pivotal moments in her life, she often thought about October 14, 1996, the day everything went wrong, and she learned that sometimes the worst days become the most important ones because they strip away everything superficial and show us what really matters. She had entered that little shop in Brixton as a princess in crisis, but she had left as a human being who understood that true nobility comes not from titles or position, but from how we treat each other when nobody is watching and nothing is expected in return. The lesson that stayed with her most profoundly was something Marcus had said about his mother. Real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about who helps you get back up, and whether you remember to help others when they fall. Diana had learned that accepting help with grace and humility was not a sign of weakness, but a recognition of our shared humanity. She had also learned that the most profound service sometimes comes from simply being present with people in their struggles, offering not solutions but solidarity. Sometimes the most important lessons come not from teaching others, but from being humble enough to learn from the quiet wisdom of ordinary people who live extraordinary lives of service, dignity, and mutual care. Diana had spent years trying to help others, but on her worst day she discovered that accepting help with grace was just as important as giving it. The princess who entered Fatima's shop that evening, broken and desperate, was not the same woman who left it a few hours later. She had been transformed by the simple recognition that she was not alone in her struggles, that ordinary people possessed extraordinary wisdom, and that real nobility was measured not by what you could do for others, but by how gracefully you could accept what others offered to do for you.